Hi, scholars. So we are moving on to a new unit in our listening and learning curriculum, and that's going to be covering Native Americans. So Native Americans were the first known people to live in the continents of North and South America. And we know that we currently live in North America. So Native Americans were the first people to live on the land that we live on today. So you may sometimes hear the term American Indians used as well instead of Native Americans. But when we say Native Americans, we also know that they are broken down into smaller groups or tribes. And based on where this tribe lived, they ate certain things, they dressed a certain way, and they lived in certain homes. And we're going to learn about all those different things of how Native Americans lived long ago and how they still live today. So over the next few weeks, we are going to cover the different tribes, three in particular. They're the Lakota Sioux tribe, the Wampanoag tribe, and the Lenape tribe. But today we're just going to give a brief introduction to Native Americans. So let's get started. Long, long, long before you and I can remember, long before your grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents can remember, there were no living people on land where we live today. There were woods and plains, but no people. There were rivers and lakes, but no people. There were deserts and mountains, but no people. There were plenty of birds and fish and animals and insects, but there were no people. But that was thousands of years ago, much earlier than any of us can remember. The first known people who lived in America are called Native Americans or American Indians, and they lived in all parts of the continent. They lived in the desert, others lived in the mountains, some lived in the woods, and others lived on the coast or near the ocean. People of the desert lived very differently from coastal people. Can you guess why that would be? You're going to learn about some of the different ways America's first known people, or Native Americans, lived. The Native Americans of long ago all needed the same things we need today. They needed food and water to stay alive. They needed shelter or places to protect themselves from the weather and wild animals. They needed clothes to keep them warm and dry. But the food the desert people ate was not the same kind of food the coastal people ate. And the houses that protected people in the woods did not look the same as the houses of those who lived in the desert. Some lived in teepees. Some lived in weetus. Some lived in hogans. Some lived in pueblos. And others lived in longhouses. Native Americans of long ago had to rely on their knowledge of nature, of the earth, the plants, and the animals that surrounded them. And everywhere they roamed, these Native Americans found ways to borrow or use from the earth all they needed to live. Some Native Americans grew their own vegetables and fruits. Others hunted buffalo. Some Native Americans hunted woodland creatures. Others caught fish from rivers, lakes, and oceans. Some Native Americans cooked their food over an open fire. Others baked food in specially made ovens. The Native Americans also needed water, but there were no sinks with running water inside their homes. So where do you think Native Americans found water long ago? Native Americans collected rainwater. They also got their water from lakes, rivers, and streams. Native Americans long ago did not have cars and trucks. There were no buses or trains or planes. So do you remember how they got around? Long ago, Native Americans traveled by foot. There were no paved roads. Native American paths were made by pounding their own footprints and hooves of herd animals. After Native Americans were here for many years, they started riding horses. After that, they traveled on horseback. And others traveled in canoes. Those who lived in the woods used their feet to make their way through thick forests and trees. After many years, those who lived on open plains welcomed the speed of horses to carry them long distances. and those who lived near lakes and rivers relied upon canoes to carry them across the waters. No matter where they lived, Native Americans made all their own clothes. Some Native American women and girls wore skirts and dresses. Men and boys often wore birch cloths and leggings. They used materials from their surroundings to make their clothes. Some Native Americans wore clothing made of animal skins, elk, deer, buffalo, and rabbit. They often decorated their clothing with beads, porcupine quills, and fringe. During the cold winter months, they wore coats of animal fur to stay warm. Others wore clothes made from soft inner bark of cedar trees, sometimes decorated with seashells. Still, others wore clothing made of fibers from different plants, cotton and yucca, and trimmed them with animal bones. In the winter, they covered themselves with cloaks made from sheep's wool to stay warm. Many women, men, boys, and girls in each of the Native American tribes across the land, from the oceans to the plains to the woods, wore moccasins on their feet. Some, however, preferred bare feet. And so you see, the people who first came to live on this rich and varied land that we now call the United States of America were just as rich and varied as the land itself. They were alike in some ways and different in others, just as the people of America are today.